Welcome to the May 20th, 2019 Pacifica Planning Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Campbell?
Here.
Commissioner Niblin?
Here.
Commissioner Krasky?
Here.
Commissioner Big Stick?
Here.
And Acting Chair Rubenstein?
Here. Commissioner Campbell, salute the flag.
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the order of agenda. Please vote.
I'll move that we approve the order of the agenda.
I'll second it.
We have a motion. Okay, that passes unanimously. Next up is the approval of the minutes from April 15th, 2019.
I move we approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay, please vote. Passes unanimously. Next up is designation of the liaison to the city council meeting. Looks like there's none.
Correct, none needed.
Okay. On to oral communications. This portion of the agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission that is not in the agenda. The time allowed for each speaker will be 3 minutes. Doesn't look like there's anybody, so we can move on.
No consent items?
No consent items. So our first public hearing will be for file number 2008-061, zoning text amendment TA 114-18 to amend Articles 2, 10, 11, and 28 of Chapter 4 of Title 9 of the Pacifica Municipal Code in order to establish the use of a health fitness club in commercially zoned areas. Recommended CEQA action exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3. Recommended action, adopt resolution initiating the amendment and recommended approval to City Council. Staff report, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Helen Gannon. The project in front of you, in November of 2018, staff received an application for a new fitness club proposed to be located in the Linda Morris Shopping Center. This application will be heard next on the agenda. The Pacifica Municipal Code currently does not allow for fitness centers, and staff believes that these sorts of uses may be desirable for the community. Thus, the proposed text amendment is to allow for the use of health/fitness clubs in commercially zoned areas of the city. Staff proposes the following definition. Health/fitness club shall mean a privately owned facility used primarily for the conduct of any one of or more of the following uses: exercise classes, tennis, handball, weightlifting, personal training, stationary or non-stationary cycling, boxing, martial arts, gymnastics, wrestling, cross-functional training, indoor rock climbing, yoga, Pilates, swimming, or any other form of exercise or sports used similar in nature as determined by the planning director. This land use may also include massage therapy, saunas, and limited retail, including but not limited to retail restaurants as accessory uses to the primary fitness uses enumerated above. Any massage use which is associated with a health/fitness club shall be governed by the applicable floor area standards contained in the Pacifica Municipal Code, Section 9-4.1001. TA-114-18 will allow for health and fitness clubs to be permitted in both the C1 and C2 zoning districts, as long as they do not exceed 2,000 square feet in gross floor area, with indoor use only, and have hours of operation restricted from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. A proposal that exceeds 2,000 square feet in gross floor area or includes outdoor use and has hours of operation between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. would require discretionary review in the form of a use permit. Staff recommends that the use shall be a conditional use and subject to a use permit in all cases within the C3 or Service Commercial Zoning District because of potential incompatibilities between a health and fitness club use and existing industrial-type uses, and because the typical development pattern of existing sites within the C3 zoning district is such that the sites commonly have limited off-street parking facilities. The Pacifica Municipal Code currently has a parking standard for health, studio, and spas, which sets a parking standard of 1 space for each 200 square feet of gross floor area. Staff believes that the required parking standard is consistent with the new proposed use of health/fitness club, and so we recommend that the proposed ordinance retitle this to health/fitness club. The proposed amendments are consistent with general plan and local coastal program policies and are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Therefore, staff recommends that the commission adopts the resolution included as attachment A to initiate the text amendment and to recommend approval to the city council. I'm here for any questions.
Commissioner Big Stick.
Sure. So just for clarity's sake, prior to this, we allowed what under these definitions would be considered a health and fitness club. I'm thinking of 24-hour fitness. There used to be a place in Pedro Point. I think there's one in Eureka Square. Just for clarity's sake, how was it that those were able to go in before now?
So we've done a little bit of research historically, and it looks like this type of use, health and fitness, was listed under the CR, which is Commercial Recreation District, which at one point was assumed into some of the other C1, C2 districts. And it appears that some of the permitted uses and conditionally permitted uses kind of got lost in the, got lost in the shuffle as they were merging the two, or the several of the different commercial districts. And then we further found that staff appeared to be able to kind of shoehorn it into health and spas, which are somewhat associated with massage establishments. And so recently, due to state law changes, that use definition was amended within the last several years. It was before some of the commissioners. And so I think between those two historic changes, we realized that when we had this new use come in, that we needed to make these adjustments to the code.
Okay. And then following on that, you mentioned commercial recreational. I see C1, C2, C3 here. Is a commercial recreational zoning a thing that still exists, or is that gone now?
So I believe that the map was not updated, so you still have a zoning map that shows CR, commercial recreation. And when you reference that in the code now, it refers you to another commercial district. So that's how that was done without totally redoing the city's zoning maps.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Niblin.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. I think this was all laid out very well in the staff report, and I appreciate it. I was kind of curious, though, about some of the thresholds that are set forth, particularly with respect to the C1 and, the C1 district and sort of the of right use at 2,000 square feet, and sort of why was 2,000? I guess one of my questions is why was 2,000 selected square feet as opposed to a different threshold, maybe a little larger? And I'm sort of curious about how much 2,000 is. I'm trying to get my own mind. I go to the 24-hour fitness, for example, there at the base of Manor, and I'm sort of curious about how big that place is, and what are we talking about when we're talking 2,000 square feet?
Yeah, so a little background with how we came up with that number. Staff did a bunch of research with other cities in the county of San Mateo, and we found cities such as Redwood City gave those detailed numbers, and so we felt providing you with a number such as 2,000 would allow staff to prevent some of these smaller projects from coming to a public hearing like this. And so the 2,000, there's a few places I know in over in Oceana Market, there's, some studios and Bell, they do those kettlebell workouts. And so those are all roughly 2,000 square feet spaces. And so the 24-hour, I don't know off the top of my head how large that space is, but it is much larger than 2,000 square feet.
Yeah, and I guess where I was going is a sort of curious about whether or not maybe something even a little bigger than 2,000 square feet might be an appropriate number for us to be considering for an of right use. But again, I'm having a little trouble kind of conceptualizing how big that might be and what kinds of impacts we might be talking about as we get bigger. 2,000 struck me as maybe a little small, but just an observation. And then the 11 o'clock sort of ending hours, and is that kind of standard for the industry, or at least in San Mateo County or in our surrounding jurisdictions?
Yes, from some of the research that we had done, that is also the time that we found. And I think, if I remember correctly, 24-hour closes at 11 p.m. on a Friday evening. So that's something that we took into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Campbell.
So I just want to be clear on the definition. Can you explain one more time how it impacts or how it would license massage parlors or therapies or saunas?
It wouldn't, sorry. It wouldn't affect the massage establishment ordinance that's in place. It would, I was just explaining that that's how kind of this use kind of got lost in the shuffle in some of the ordinance updates.
So by not impacting, does it allow it? Or does it? I guess just to cut right to the chase, would this allow massage parlors to come into places that they wouldn't now?
So currently our C1 regulations allow for, and I'll quote this, personal services such as professional offices, shoe repair, barber and beauty shops, laundries and dry cleaning establishments, banks and financial institutions, and massage establishments under 640 square feet of treatment floor space. So as long as they're remaining within those boundaries, that they would still be allowed with this new text amendment. That language in the new definition is so that we're not confusing or having to change this existing text.
Okay, so C1 would allow it if it's under 600 square feet. This text amendment will allow it in other areas as long as it's under 600 and something square feet. Is that right? Or am I missing it?
I'm not sure I'm under.
I guess what I really am just trying to get at is this, what we're doing tonight, allowing for the establishment of massage parlors in different areas of the city than they would otherwise be allowed? Today.
So definitely not in the C1. C1, it is a permitted use, as I just read out. Our C2.
And if they were, I'd want, well, let's see if they, I guess what the
So
answer.
my understanding is that a massage therapy that's associated with a fitness club could be allowable.
Okay.
As long as it's within and associated with the fitness club, and it's not a standalone establishment. And they would still be required to get the police department licensing that's required under the municipal code.
Okay, so that's all this is doing, is allowing fitness clubs to come in if they have an ancillary massage component, that's fine, but a standalone massage parlors will not be,
Correct.
okay.
Correct. I think the thought process was something along the lines of like physical therapy and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
right, okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Do we have an applicant? No.
Did you have another comment?
Yeah,
Accept another question.
sorry. Commissioner Bigsick.
Sure. So on page 24 of the packet, where it actually goes into the language of the ordinance itself, there was a place where I was confused, and either you can untie my confusion or it might be a legitimate typo, but section 4 amended, where it's talking about, I think, the C2 district. Both A and B, it leads with the following uses shall be permitted in the C1 district. Uses allowed in the C1 district, but I thought it was talking about the C2 district. So am I misunderstanding, or is it just a typo?
That is a typo.
Okay,
We will
thank
fix
you.
that. I'm sorry.
Okay, if there are no more questions for staff, I'll open it for public comments. If anybody's interested in speaking on this agenda item, please fill out a card and bring it up. Doesn't look like there's any movement, so we can move on to the next item. Oh, we can bring it back to the commission. Yeah, bring it back to the
Close the
commission for
public
deliberation. Closing public hearing. Commissioner Niblin.
Well, I would just state that I thought the staff report did a real good job of laying out the sort of the hole we're trying to fill here, and it sounds like there was a real good rationale for all the various sort of details that are set forth in the proposed ordinance amendments. So, absent any further discussion on it, I'd be prepared to make a motion.
Commissioner Big Stick.
Just want to echo what Commissioner Niblin just said. I thought the history of how we came to this point was interesting, and I'll be happy to second that motion when it is made.
Okay, so we have a second?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and make my motion then. I'm going to move that the Planning Commission finds that the proposed ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, adopts the resolution included as Attachment A to the staff report to initiate the text amendment and recommend approval to the City Council, and incorporates all maps and testimony into the record by reference.
And I will second.
Okay, please vote. That passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is file number 2018-053, use permit UP 111-18, to renovate an existing 6,920 square foot tenant space to establish and operate on an Anytime Fitness Health Club franchise at the Lindemar Shopping Center at 1367 Lindemar Boulevard. Recommended CEQA action Class 1 and Class 3 categorical exemptions. CEQA guidelines sections 15301 and 15303. Recommended action is approved as conditioned. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubenstein. The proposed project involves the renovation of 3 existing tenant spaces totaling 6,920 square feet for a health and fitness club, known as Anytime Fitness, within the Lindemar Shopping Center. There are no proposed changes to the building's exterior except for signage, which would be subject to ministerial review by staff in accordance with the approved master sign program for the Lindemar Shopping Center. As discussed with item number 1, this application is being processed concurrently with a zoning text amendment that would allow for such uses subject to certain standards. The proposed facility will provide cardio and resistance equipment with trainers and occasional group exercise classes. Proposed hours of operation are Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. These will be considered to be the franchise's business hours, with trainers working outside of these hours with clients. The gym will otherwise be accessible to members 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including periods of time when the gym will not have an on-staff attendant. No outdoor use is being proposed. Based on the parking standards for a health and fitness club as amended by TA-114-18, the proposed club would require 35 spaces. The parking analysis found as Attachment E concludes that even at peak demand between 6:30 a.m. and 8:30 a.m., Monday through Friday, there would still be a surplus of parking spaces. During this time, the Lindemar Shopping Center's peak parking load is less than 25% of the center's parking capacity. Additionally, it is staff's opinion that there are many underutilized parking spaces in the east and southeast portions of the shopping center that are easily accessible to the proposed health and fitness center. The shopping center owner will be installing permanent directional signs to inform shopping center customers of these additional parking areas within the next few weeks. The proposed fitness and health club is consistent with the general plan designation of commercial and lies within the C1 zoning district. This proposed use is currently not allowed in the C1 zoning district. However, subsequent to City Council's enactment of an ordinance containing the provisions of text amendment TA-114-18, the proposed use would be an allowed use within the C1 zoning district. For these reasons, staff recommends approval of the project as conditioned, and I'm here for any questions.
Commissioner Big Stick.
Yeah, when the parking study was conducted, do we know what time of year, what month specifically it was conducted during?
Yes, I believe it was in October of 2018. I can double check.
Yeah, on page
Yes,
77.
October 18th, 2018.
And,
And the application was taken in November of 2018.
cool. And out of curiosity, if we were to say the parking is not sufficient, is there an alternative option?
I'm not sure I'm understanding.
If we decided that, for whatever reason, we're of the impression that maybe parking is not sufficient, maybe there does need to be more parking. I'm not saying I'm going in that direction. I'm curious if we were to go in that direction, whether or not there's an option for either putting in more parking or if it was discussed at all.
So I am not aware of property that is available to put in additional parking that is under the control of the owner of the shopping center. I'm just kind of going through my limited knowledge of the area, and I don't know that there's perhaps, unused planters or things like that where you can get a few more spaces off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Commissioner Niblin.
Thank you. I just had, and this may be a question more appropriate to the applicant, but in case you've discussed it, I was kind of curious about this notion of sort of access by club members during times when there's no staff member on site, and particularly given the size of the space, I'm just sort of curious about it, whether that's kind of industry standard, and so whether staff had any thoughts or concerns about that.
Yeah, the applicant is here. I think he'd be better to speak on, accessibility. I believe that it's going to be kind of like a key card access type thing, very secure.
Mechanics of it I'm not as concerned about. I'm sort of more concerned about the appropriateness of, or safety and things like that of having people on a site when there's no staff present. And I was, again, kind of curious about what the industry practice is around all that. I can put a tack in it, though, and we can take it up with the applicant.
Commissioner Kraske.
Yes, so this business would be going in, I'm just trying to picture it, as on the southeast side of the shopping center, like down kind of by the taco place, Bank of America, down that direction?
Yes.
Correct. Yeah, Bank of
So
America.
from what I understand is there's like a very large parking area behind by Bank of America that's often unused. Is that reserved for anything, or is that just an open parking space as well, or parking area as well for this business?
It's our understanding that that's available
Great.
to all businesses.
Yeah, there's like, it's got to be at least 100 spaces back there alone, so I think there's, in my mind, plenty of parking.
Correct.
Commissioner Big Stick.
I had a question dovetailing off of Commissioner Niblin's, but I think it's probably best for the applicant. Thank you. I'll hold it for now.
Okay, at this point, we'd like to bring up the applicant. You'll have 10 minutes to present your project.
10 minutes include questioning, or that's in addition to? Okay. Thank you for considering our application. And I'm going to take a few minutes here. I'll introduce myself. I'll introduce the company. I'll try and weave in some of the questions that you guys had, but I'm certainly happy to sit here forever and talk about this. I love this industry. I love this business. I could spend the next 10 years talking about it, but we're down to 9:44. So my name is Brett Livingstone. I'm 51 years old. Been married for 22 years to a much better half than me. 2 kids, 2 dogs, and I live in Windsor, California, so up north. I was raised kind of in New Orleans, but I've been here 40 years. So I'm fully Californiized at this point, and I just absolutely love this area. The company itself, Anytime Fitness, as we start to talk about that, there are 4,000 locations around the world in 29 countries. So as we'll talk about some of the security, we'll talk about some of the parking issues as we dive down there a little bit. The company's been around about 18 years. We've been with them for 10 now. We have 5 clubs. This will be our 6th. We have, our oldest club is 10 years old, and our newest club is 2 weeks tomorrow, over in Noreen. And I wanted to answer kind of 2 basic questions before we dive a little deeper, is why is Pacifica good for us? And then I'll flip that around and say, why are we good for Pacifica? Okay? So why is Pacifica good for us? Over those 10 years that we've been working on this and with this franchise, we've kind of honed what we like to do. And we provide a lot of amenities in the club. We provide a lot of personal touch, that type of thing. So we need to look for different demographic mixes to make that work, ultimately. And there are certain areas in Northern California that work, but Pacifica has it in spades. And I've been looking and talking with these folks for probably about 2.5 years or so for this particular space. And we finally got down to the point where it seems like it may work, pending the decision here of the board, of course. But it's got all the things essentially that we're looking for. It's got enough people. 20% of the population in California joins gyms, so I need to make sure that there's enough people to make this work, ultimately. There's a high employment rate. There's a high level of education. Over 50% of the people have at least one college degree in this area. So these all things that bode well for the fitness. Typically, as a default, educated people take care of themselves, and fitness is usually part of that. It's established community. These people have been here for a really long time, and they take pride in this community. And I tell you what, maybe the most important thing is when you drive over Highway 1 and you're coming down into Pacifica over there, it is such an incredibly beautiful area. There are families that are out there exercising and running with their dogs. There's people surfing. There's people riding bikes. It is not only a fitness community, it's an outdoor fitness community, and that bodes well, I think, for what we like to do and how we like to operate. That's essentially why we want to be here. Why are we a good fit for Pacifica? In short, we're super community oriented. We do our best to weave ourselves into the community. Of course, we join the Chambers of Commerce. We sponsor Little League and softball. We sponsor soccer. Even during in Berkeley, they've got an art walk, and we hang local artists' art on the wall, and they come through once a quarter and just kind of enjoy being in there. So we're happy to participate in that type of stuff. We certainly do the parades. We certainly do the health fairs and all that type of thing. So we like to weave ourselves in. And in Santa Rosa, 2 of my clubs are in Santa Rosa, and you guys know about the fires from a 1.5 years or so ago. We were the first club to open back up, and we opened back up for free to the community. And in fact, we took trainers from other clubs and let them come in and train their clients in our club for free so that they can continue their income and continue working forward. So when I say that we're in the community, it's in our mission statement. Our mission statement is to raise the self-esteem of the community. So, and then most importantly, in the tail end of this, we're going to hire local people to do the work for the tenant improvements, and then we're going to hire local people for our staff. Now, in a traditional health club environment, we probably plan about 20 staff here, probably 7 of them, 8 of them full-time, something like that. In a traditional health club environment, it's kind of a low-pay environment, but we look at it a little bit differently. We want it to be a career, oriented position. So our general managers have health care, and they get paid very well. And our personal trainers get at a very aggressive split on commission so that they can, make a living at that and not have to work it from 5 to 8 in the morning and then come back and work from 4 to 8 at night. That they're able to work, when it can find time and make a solid living at that. Our people stay with us a long time. Our general managers have all been with us longer than 5 years. We have trainers that have been with us 10 years. So that kind of speaks to our engagement with our staff and the community in general. So I've only taken 5 of the 10. But I can go on for the rest of eternity. I just want to say thank you for letting us, for considering, and I'm happy to answer some of the questions. You want me to start with the security question?
Yeah, go ahead.
With regard to people being in the...
Yeah, I think it's partly security, it's partly safety, it's partly just concerns about, havoc if you don't have staff there. So
Right. And I can see why that's a concern. And ultimately, this is the 3rd public, conditional use I've had to go through. And that's number 1 that comes up. Parking ends up being number 2, but that's number 1. Ultimately, everybody gets this kind of, this key fob, if you will. So you strike it at the door, and this is the key to the kingdom. Only the people who are members have key fobs, and only they can go into the clubs. Once you get inside the club, and a club of this size will have about 26 different cameras that are inside there. So I can look on my phone right now and look into any of our clubs and see what's going on. Our managers live local, and it identifies if 2 people go in on one key swipe, or if somebody tries to get into an office that's closed, or somebody tries to go out a back exit. Our managers are notified first, our Vice President Operations Dennis is second, I'm notified third, and the authorities are called in if necessary. We have a very, very, very low incident of issues. In fact, I would say one of the coolest things we have about I could talk about this forever, sorry. One of the coolest things we have in our club is an honor bar. And it's a refrigerator that has drinks and candy bars and all that kind of stuff. And we do not lock it. And it's exactly that, it's an honor bar. You can reach in, you can grab a water, you can grab a muscle milk, and you sign your name on a pad or leave some dollars in the cash box that we drop there. And we do not have stuff walk away. We inventory all the time.
So it sounds like, maybe just to get a little more granular, the extent to which you've had issues, can you quantify
That we've
that,
had
or just
issues?
if you've had any sort of?
We haven't had any issues. And the other, in a very broad 10,000-foot sense, I would say that if there's 4,000 of them around the world, 29 different countries, so there's all these different environments that they're operating in, and they're all open 24 hours. And if it were generically an issue, the house of cards would have fallen a long time ago. During some of the other public hearings that I've had police officers, fire come in. And what they typically say is that because the center is lit, the facility is lit, because there are alarms, because there are cameras, let's say ne'er-do-wells don't want to be necessarily involved in that. So they kind of stay, so it adds a layer of security to the center.
That all makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Does that answer the question as you had it?
It does.
Okay, awesome.
I'd like to delve just a little bit deeper on security itself for just a moment. My concern is less inside the establishment than right outside the establishment. I'm
Yep.
very familiar with that shopping center.
Yep.
First of all, you said you're from New Orleans?
Originally from New Orleans.
I'm a Tulane man myself, Roll Green Wave.
Lived in Algiers. Yeah.
Right on. So that area of the shopping center is pretty far away from the rest of the shopping center.
Yeah.
And while I work right there in the shopping center, that's about as far away from me as it gets, and I'm not entirely sure how the lighting is right there in that area. And again, I'm concerned right outside much more than inside from my angle. I don't know if it changes anything if a camera were to be posted right outside, but if that were an option, is that something you're considering for the
We do
security?
cameras outside all of our clubs.
Very good.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure that if anyone is coming in late at night to blow off steam or do their, I could easily imagine, especially students coming in at 2 a.m. in between studying to just,
Yeah, right. And ultimately, as Helen and I have talked about, and I think she did a great job of kind of representing who we are, is that, it presents an opportunity for people who maybe don't have an opportunity to work out. So the law enforcement, the fire, the doctors and nurses who may work late at night and maybe don't have an option to work out during the middle of the day or kind of traditional gym hours. The reality is 2% of our people are probably working out past 11 o'clock or before 5 a.m. in the morning. But it gives those 2% an option that maybe they don't have available to them now.
sure. And aside from lighting and a camera looking a little bit on the outside, I would imagine you're also in contact with Kimco Security
Absolutely.
to make sure that there's somebody walking that area where there's pretty much nothing else going on aside from
We're going to
cheers
make
that
sure the
time of night.
lights are on 24 hours a day as well.
Everything's cool.
And what we've found that there were some cases, not necessarily our clubs, but in other owners that I'm aware of, law enforcement, if there's been something that's happened in the area, they've gone and, looked at their cameras and looked at the tape to see, is it tape anymore? Probably not, I'm dating myself. Look at the recordings to see what may or may not have happened. So it kind of adds to the security of the location. And again, I'm going to go back to if someone has ill intent, they probably don't want to cause that ill intent in a lit, recorded, camera area. So I think we'll add to the area back there. And I think that you guys nailed it, but it's the 3 suites that are between the Bank of America and the Mexican restaurant. So it's in that area in the back part of the center.
And going back to parking, it's less of a concern, more something I wanted to bring up for the sake of conversation, which I'll do again briefly during deliberation. But if you had anything more you wanted to say about the parking, that would be welcome.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably an hour-long conversation. But the simple part of it is that in our Berkeley Club, we're on Solano Avenue, which is the north end of Berkeley, very vibrant, very busy area. We have 6 paid parking spots for that entire center. People walk in from outside, people ride their bikes in, that type of thing. We'll get a percentage of that. Now, if you live 6 miles away, it's probably not the reality. But that I've been to that parking lot all hours of the day, probably on 30 different occasions over the last year. And that back area that you guys referenced, somebody referenced it. I was in there today before we came here. Nobody's parked back there. Right. And ultimately, I think that's a great solution for our people. They won't have to, park up with the Safeway area, which can get a little bit congested, and they'd probably rather have their space back there and walk in. So that's where we're planning on ultimately directing our people to park.
Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. If we have more questions, we'll call you back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open this up for public comments. If anybody has a comment, they can fill out a card and come on up. No comments, so I'll bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Commissioner Big Stick.
Sure. So my security question was fully addressed to my satisfaction, and I am very familiar with that shopping center. I would agree that back there, where the fitness center would be located, there is most of the time ample parking. That having been said, I'm not usually over on that side of the shopping center, and I'm certainly not watching it. So I was just looking at the space because it's my practice to go and review the various areas that are up for our consideration. And a couple of my customers happened to be passing by, and some of their feedback was, especially in December, when holiday shopping is in full swing, that's a time when they had a concern about parking being overflowy. Also, we often have beautiful sunny days, especially in the summertime when everybody's there for the beach and nobody wants to pay the Lindemar premium to park right on the beach. And so during certain peak hours, I had a minor concern that there might be a parking issue, although overall I agree wholeheartedly that those spaces back there are probably greatly underutilized in general.
Commissioner Niblin.
Thank you. I think I would just note that from everything I've heard and looking at the traffic study, it seems to me there's more than adequate parking. It sounds like some of the commissioners who are more familiar with the area than me would substantiate that. And we certainly don't want to build, parking to address the peak circumstances. That wouldn't be the way we'd ordinarily want to do things anyway. Seems like a well-conceived plan. It looks like the various things that staff has done with respect to this particular use permit appear quite appropriate. Any concerns I had with respect to practice or security or safety have been addressed. And it certainly does make sense to me that if this was a major problem, given the scale of the operation, we would have heard about it, or staff would have identified issues to share with us. So I'm satisfied and ready to move forward whenever anyone else is.
Commissioner Campbell.
Commissioner Nevlin pretty much captured my thoughts. I think this is one of the few instances around Lindemar Boulevard where parking is not an issue just because of that amount of parking in the back of Safeway. I think they got it. They got one of those few places left. So I'm in support of the project.
Okay, Commissioner Kraske.
Yes, I'm also in support of the project. I think it's an exciting use to have in the Lindemar Shopping Center. I had one question about, so the space right now, you guys are going to, from what I understand, it's 3 separate commercial spaces, and you're just going to remove the walls from those 3 spaces? Exactly. And how long is your lease for right now?
How long is the what?
Your lease for the space? 10 years. Okay.
20 years.
Okay. Just want to make sure the the construction of the walls wouldn't prohibit future tenants from moving in, but it sounds like you have a pretty long lease for the space, so that's good.
Commissioner Big Stick.
I think that the business will fit in well with the shopping center and will complement the shopping center quite well, and I'm ready to make a motion if there's no further deliberation.
No, I support the project as well, so.
Cool. In that case, I move that the Planning Commission find the project as exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and approve use permit UP-11-18 by adopting the attached resolution, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A, and incorporate all maps and testimony into the record by reference.
I'll second the motion. Please vote. That passes unanimously. Congratulations, you have a project.
Thank you.
Great. Next up on the agenda is file number 2019-012, Coastal Development Permit CDP 404-19 for the construction of a concrete sidewalk, curb, and gutter along Palmetto Avenue between the intersection of West Line Drive and Palmetto Avenue and 100 Palmetto Avenue. Recommended CEQA action, Class 1 and Class 4, categorical exemptions, CEQA guidelines, sections 15301 and 15304. Recommended action, approve as conditioned. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I am Associate Planner Bonnie O'Connor. The proposed project before you is a project that would include construction of a concrete sidewalk, curb, and gutter along the west side of the existing street on Palmetto Avenue. The City of Pacifica is proposing to create a 1,400-foot-long, 4-foot, 6-inch wide sidewalk to connect an existing terminus of a sidewalk south of 100 Palmetto Avenue to sidewalk facilities on the northeast side of the intersection of Westline Drive and Palmetto Avenue. 2 curb ramps would be installed on the northwest and northeast sides of the Westline Drive and Palmetto Avenue intersection. These improvements would create an accessible path of travel to the Manor Plaza Shopping Center, which is in response to an injunction placed on the City of Pacifica as a result of the city's agreement to a stipulated consent decree and final order from a complaint filed with the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. This portion of Palmetto Avenue is the only intra-Pacifica connection between the Fairmont West and the West Edge Mar Pacific Manor neighborhoods. This portion of Palmetto is also within the route of the Coastal Trail, Bay Ridge Trail, and the Pacifica designated North-South City Trail. The project would provide adequate pedestrian facilities in an area that currently contains a narrow social trail established from existing pedestrian use. Understanding the potential sensitivity of the area, the city had a biological resources assessment conducted on the area to identify and shape project design features. The biological resources assessment identified that the project would directly impact 0.01 acres of northern coastal scrub and 0.04 acres of coastal dune habitat. As stated in the biological resources assessment, these vegetation communities can be considered environmentally sensitive habitat areas, or ESHAs, by the California Coastal Commission. However, as further explained in the staff report, the portion of these communities within the project footprint would not meet the Coastal Commission's definition of an ESHA because the areas are not rare or especially valuable because of their special nature or role in an ecosystem. Design features for the project, which have also been incorporated as conditions of approvals, would require the implementation of certain measures which would reduce any potential indirect impact on adjacent ESHAs, including a Coastal Commission-defined wetland, and include restoration habitat, which would improve the quality of the surrounding habitat. Furthermore, the project would reduce the spread of human disturbance on the area, reduce erosion caused by stormwater runoff, and reduce the spread of invasive species to the area, which would also improve the quality of the habitat areas in the long term. The proposed project is not characterized as new development because it would only make improvements to an existing street and right-of-way. Because the project is not considered new development, a site-specific geologic or geotechnical report detailing the projected rate of bluff erosion along the project site was not performed. However, the shoreline along the project is currently unprotected, and coastal erosion is projected in the area, which may limit the life of the project unless protection measures are incorporated. The immediate benefit of the proposed project would provide to the immediate benefit that the proposed project would provide to the surrounding community would outweigh the comparatively minimal investment required for the sidewalk, even if the life of the project is limited due to coastal erosion. Furthermore, design features for the project, which have also been incorporated as conditions of approvals, would require city staff to periodically repair, maintain the improvement to maintain safe conditions, and in the event that materials from the sidewalk fall onto the beach, a proposed condition of approval would require the applicant to clean or clear fallen debris. For the reasons provided in this presentation and the staff report, staff recommends the Planning Commission to approve the project as conditioned, and staff is available to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just have one question. Has there been any bicycle or pedestrian incidents related to autos along that stretch of road in the past, on record?
I don't have that data for you.
Okay.
Commissioner Campbell.
So we've got this new letter from it's Mike O'Connell, Dave Blackman, talking about this culvert that's causing erosion. Is there any city opinion on whether that culvert is causing that amount of erosion versus, and will the sidewalk get at that issue?
I will let Ray Donginas from engineering help address that.
Good evening, Commissioner. My name is Raymond Dunguines with the City of Pacifica Public Works. There is a existing culvert that runs underneath Palmetto Avenue from the Bowl property, which is on the east side of Palmetto, and currently takes the storm drainage from that side, and there is a outfall on the west side. Currently, the storm drainage is kept in a flexible pipe that runs all the way to the bottom of the ravine. So if you go out there, there is a pipe inside a, it's like a sock going all the way down. So it's keeping the erosion to a minimum and keeping it away from the bluff. However, I think our DPW staff needs to do some repairs to, there might be a break in the pipe, so we'll need to do an inspection and repair immediately.
Thank you.
Commissioner Big Stick.
Sure, and I have a handful of questions, but starting with the letter we received, and I just kind of thumbed through it quickly.
Sure.
So I'm not exactly sure what I read as I read it, but my immediate sense was that one of the concerns of the letter writer was that they were responsible for some of the improvements to this pipe, and this might complicate or add cost to the improvements they had agreed to make a while back. Am I anywhere near what this actually says?
The letter says that they had proposed a storm drainage improvement that will take the water from the existing pipe and divert it south to Palmetto, where it will connect to an existing storm drainage city pipe. So the letter mentions that if the city builds a sidewalk and then they come after us, their project comes after, they would have to tear down some of the sidewalk to install their pipe, which is true. However, there is a way around that, which they don't have to install their sidewalk underneath our sidewalk. I mean, they don't have to install their pipe underneath our sidewalk. They can diagonally connect to the nearest pipe and, miss the sidewalk altogether.
And again, I read quickly. My sense was they're under the impression that their improvement will avoid a greater amount of erosion than if they don't do this. Can you just speak to whether or not there's going to be more erosion if they don't do it, or?
Well, the proposed pipe from the 4009 Palmetto would help alleviate the situation, since the water going to the west side will be diverted south, and that water will no longer affect the ravine on the west side.
And that's the point where it's thinnest, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a way to work with them when they come to the conclusion that they want to go forward with this, or are they purely on their own?
This is the preliminary portion of the project. We have to go through and get the environmental from the city, the CDP from the city. Our next process would be, since this is a federal grant, we will need to go through the Caltrans process, and we would have to go through their environmental process. So it's going to be at least 9 months for that process, and including construction drawings, bidding the project out, et cetera. So we can work with the applicant to see who's going to go first or whatever.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Other question, and we received another letter. There were a couple of interesting points made, especially where it's thinnest between where the sidewalk would be and the ravine. Is there any thought for a possibility of guardrails or even a sign that says, it's really dangerous right here next to the sidewalk, stay over there, something like that.
Those are not proposed as part of the project. It wasn't found that they would be necessary at this time. As the condition of approval states, if hazardous conditions were to present itself, then the city would address it.
Okay. The letter writer mentions the GGNRA. Can you elaborate on whether or not that's GGNRA area and whether or not it's necessary to contact them?
The project is within the existing public right-of-way, not GGNRA real property. GGNRA, the National Park Service was notified of the project because they are the property owners adjacent to the sidewalk, as were in the same manner that all other neighboring property owners were notified of the project.
And the letter writer mentions that the sidewalk appears to coincide with the California Coastal Trail and asks if there's any plans for signage in that regard.
That is very possible. Our Open Space and Parkland Advisory Committee is actually putting in a large effort to update our coastal, and working with the Coastal Conservancy to update our coastal trail signage along our entire shoreline of Pacifica, adding or obtaining a few extra signs from the Coastal Conservancy, which are free to us, is not an issue.
And then a couple of questions from me now. So the reason we're doing this is because an injunction and a dissent decree. So essentially, we have to put this thing in order to satisfy what was put on us as a result of the court, right?
We are forced, or we are required, we've agreed to create an accessible path that reaches the Pacific Manor Plaza. So while this exact project was not identified as being required, staff found that this was the best response to that requirement.
Within that context, it's either going to be on the east side or the west side. Were kind of our two options, correct?
Exactly right.
And then we talked about runoff and erosion earlier. That project aside, which is coincident with this one apparently, by doing this, the drainage should be better and should preclude some of the erosion that otherwise might happen, correct?
So it will help with stormwater drainage in most directly in that the water that lands on the new sidewalk would be directed into the street rather than into the bluff itself and be absorbed as groundwater, which can have can result in increased erosion. So for the footprint of the project, it will improve the stormwater drainage for that. And then, as Ray discussed earlier about the other drainage.
Thank you. And my last question for now anyway. Up at West Line, where that curve is, actually parked right across the street from the west side. And it occurred to me it's not the safest place if a pedestrian's trying to get across the street from West Line to the other side of Palmetto. Was there any discussion of whether or not to just put in a flashing crosswalk right there?
Between the east side of Palmetto to the west side of Palmetto at the West Line intersection?
Yes.
So that project would take the pedestrian to the east side, but on the east side, the sidewalk ends in where the bowl is, so they would still have to cross somewhere else to get back to the west side to the existing sidewalk. The existing sidewalk exists in front of the Dollar radio station. That's where we propose to connect. So if you take them east, they would have to come back west.
I hear what you're saying. So as I was entering that area to take a look myself, there were people walking on the west side. It's conceivable that some of those people have houses on the east side when the houses begin. And I know that there's some sidewalk that starts a little further down from West Line, but my concern is a safe place to cross from one side to the other. And if people are walking up the west side and eventually they get to the place where their house is, they're going to want to cross over to the east side to get to their house. So I'm just trying to, my question is whether or not there was consideration as to whether or not to put a flashing crosswalk somewhere that can get them from the west to the east if they happen to have a house on the other side.
Correct, yes, I understand. We did not consider, this was basically to provide a safe travel from one spot all the way to the Manor Plaza where the consent decree had specifically mentioned.
And if it might be a good idea to put such a crosswalk from one side to the other, would this be the appropriate time to think about such a thing?
Yes, so we also have a separate project, which is the City of Pacifica citywide crosswalk project. So the next block over, which is Crenshaw, we are planning to put 4 ADA curb ramps there, and we could probably, since we're doing all 4, we can put crosswalks there, painted crosswalks.
And I appreciate that the time to talk crosswalks comes later. So my last comment is, as I was exiting my car, it was pretty much right there on that corner where West Line is. That's about where I parked. That's about where I crossed to the other side. And that's where it occurred to me that there's a lot of blind area there, especially for any pedestrian, especially kids. Because as I was walking up, it was kids walking up the west side. They were probably young high school age, maybe older middle school age. And as an adult who's comfortable walking in such a fashion to put my life on the line, it occurs to me children almost certainly are apt to walk in such a fashion, and they might not be as considerate as to the dangers as they're doing so. So I just want to throw out there that that might be a good place to include a flashing crosswalk, especially since there's a lot of blind area there for somebody trying to cross.
Yes, we'd definitely take that into consideration. The intersection of West Line and Palmetto, generally we try not to put crosswalks. It's a mid-block on the other side, so it's a little bit more trickier because the all 4-way is not controlled.
That makes sense to me. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Campbell?
My question got answered, thanks.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I will open this up for public comment. If you would like to speak, please fill out an orange card and come on up. I have a card already for Mike O'Connell. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Commissioners. I'm Mike O'Connell, one of the owners of the 4009 Palmetto project. I like this project. I like sidewalks. I design sidewalks for a living, and this area is overdue for a sidewalk. But I do have some concerns with this project. Ray spoke about the coordination with the 4009 Palmetto project and the storm drain improvements that we volunteered to do as part of that project. There's no nexus for us to install those storm drain improvements. We just felt it was critical to help protect our investment, but that's not a storm drain issue. And so while I'm confident that Ray and I can do the coordination so that we're not tearing out the new sidewalks later, it's not a guarantee that that project is going to happen. I would very much like it to. It's very close to happening, but it's not funded. And so this project should consider those same storm drain improvements before we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in public funds on installing a sidewalk in an area that's potentially unstable without these improvements. The local coastal plan requires geotechnical studies for new projects. I understand that staff has characterized this as not a new project or not a new development, and I don't think that negates the need for site-specific geotechnical studies. The LCP itself states that the bluff erosion and retreat is 2 feet per year, and we're talking about putting a sidewalk within 7.5 feet of the bluff. So are we going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of public funds and have the sidewalk be potentially undermined within 3 or 4 years. The report relies on a model from the Pacific Institute for Erosion, which is based on sea level rise. It's not actually based on the local issue here, which is the erosion from the culvert. I do think more consideration needs to be made for putting the sidewalk on the east side. I don't think there's as much environmentally sensitive habitat on that side. I walked it. It looks like a lot of ice plants. It would be 30% less sidewalk if you built it on the east side. This is not a small project, 1,400 feet of sidewalk, lots of curb and gutter. By my estimations, it's at least a $300,000 project. And so, I just want to make sure that we're thinking about it correctly and having a sidewalk that's appropriate and it's a good use of public funds. And so the last thing I want to mention in my 2 seconds, green infrastructure. This is a great candidate for green infrastructure. It's on the city's green infrastructure list as a potential project, and we don't have any green infrastructure projects that have been built in the city, and this is actually a really excellent candidate.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the commission for deliberations. Commissioner Big Stick.
First a question and then my comments. The speaker a couple of times mentioned a number of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Could you tell us approximately what a dollar amount might be?
Go ahead and let Mr. Dungeness respond.
We estimate this project to be approximately $400,000. The grant funds that we got from the federal government, we got $330,000, and the city's matching will come from SB1 monies.
So are you saying that none of it's coming out of the city coffers?
That is correct.
Wonderful. And all that grant money that we got, is that contingent on the west side plan, or could it be changed to the east side plan if we so chose?
When we applied for the grant, we specifically had this site on the west side as when we applied for the grant.
Okay, thank you very much. So when I was walking it earlier today, as I was pulling up in my car, immediately I noticed 3 kids walking on the west side where there is no sidewalk. And again, they all look to be about young high school age, maybe freshmen of high school, or maybe older middle school age. One of them was on a little scooter, foot-pedaled scooter. And then as I was walking it down, because I figured, well, if pedestrians are already walking here and I want to take a close look, I'm going to walk the entire length, down and back. And as I was walking down, an older couple toward the south end, as I was arriving there, were walking up, again on that side. They might have been tourists, they might have just been neighbors taking their evening stroll. The point is, of the 5 people, immediately I saw later in the day, during what I imagine won't be peak hours for the traffic in that area, they all automatically chose the west side. I noticed all the footprints in the sand, and I noticed that there was also kind of a trail developed, especially in the north side of this area. There's very much already a trail basically there that's approximately sidewalk size. And of that entire length, it's almost as though very naturally and intuitively there practically already is a sidewalk except for the lack of sidewalk. So that was my observation, just in terms of an intuitive kind of a thing, which isn't necessarily a good reason to make a decision. A good reason to make a decision is that what also occurs to me is, if we're worried about erosion in that culvert there, if we put a mitigating anything to try and get runoff to go in a different direction, which it sounds like is exactly what this sidewalk will be, hopefully we're avoiding at least a little bit of the erosion. And I am confident that city staff is able to work with people proposing to make an improvement that will be helpful. Can't guarantee anything, but it sounds like it's assumed to be a good idea. So due to the fact that runoff will be taken away from causing further erosion, and it's already practically a sidewalk as it is, and we have all the money in place and it's not costing the city apparently a cent, I am fully in favor of this construction.
Commissioner Niblin.
Just a couple of real quick questions. Was there a particular timeline in the consent decree for having this project done?
I'm not aware of a timeline in the consent decree.
Thank you. Second question, and we had this letter from Mr. Lawrence, Cliff Lawrence, and read it real quickly, but one of the things that caught my eye was sort of the conditions of approval, made reference to hours of construction, and I think it was this letter, maybe it was the other letter. I think the point was that our conditions of approval set forth an 8 o'clock start time for construction, whereas for private projects, I guess it's 9 o'clock generally. Is that true? And is there a particular reason why we would, I can think of reasons why we want to, but why we'd have a different start time here? And I actually haven't had the chance to go back and double check and make sure that's a correct representation, but it was in one of these two letters, either from Mr. Lawrence or perhaps Mr. O'Connell.
Our conditions of approval do not include any limitations on construction hours for the project.
Oh, I see. Work in the public, oh, here it is, I found it. It's item 7 on this letter. Maybe I just misunderstood it. Work in the public right-of-way is stated as being permitted starting at 8 a.m. This should be changed to 9 is what the letter says. I'm not even suggesting it should. I just wanted to make sure I understood the point.
I'm sorry, on what
I'm
letter
looking
are
at
you
the letter that we received from
Mike
Mr.
O'Connell's letter.
Mr. O'Connell. There's an item 7 on the last page. And the statement is that work in the public right-of-way is stated as being permitted starting at 8 a.m., which seems like a perfectly fine time to start as far as I'm concerned. But apparently there's a statement here that says that 9 a.m. is generally the condition that the city would impose on private development projects for work in the right-of-way.
So our building department, we have construction hours in our code that are, I believe it's 8 to 7.
Look up the construction hours. Mr. Dunganis, I don't know if there's another standard for public works projects, but we would, if there's not, the city would be held to the same standard that private construction is.
Well, I was imagining maybe an encroachment permit, that maybe that's a standard condition in an encroachment permit allowing for work in the right-of-way, but just...
Commissioner, our encroachment permit for work in the city right away is typically 8 to 5.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe that's sufficient.
Okay. No other comment? So,
I'm ready to make a motion.
okay. Commissioner Niblin?
I'll move that the Planning Commission finds the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and approves Coastal Development Permit CDP 40419 by adopting the resolution in Attachment A, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A, and incorporates all maps and testimony into the record by reference.
Commissioner Kraske?
Yeah, I second that motion.
Okay, please vote. Okay, passes unanimously. Next up are commission communications. Oh, Commissioner Bigsick.
Sure, I don't have any true communications this week. I just wanted to ask the question because I know there's that Home for All meeting happening tomorrow. Are you going to be speaking to that, even though it's kind of past the RSVP moment? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We're ready for staff communication?
Yeah, staff communications and up.
Yes, so as Commissioner Big Stick mentioned, the Home for All event is happening tomorrow night. It is past the RSVP date, but we are anticipating perhaps we will have some walk-ins, and of course, the commissioners are welcome to join us. It starts at 6 p.m. Dinner will be served. And then the only other announcement I have is, and it's at IBL, sorry, excuse me, 6 p.m. The only other announcement I had is that the 1567 Beach project was appealed to City Council, and so we are in the process of scheduling that, and we'll be back when we need a liaison to the commission.
Great, thank you.
And there will be childcare provided at the Home for All event tomorrow as well, yes?
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
So, read that.
Just a motion to adjourn.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Okay.
I will second.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Anyone agreed by the action of the Planning Commission has 10 calendar days to appeal the decision in writing to the City Council? Good job. Okay.